Louisville, Kentucky, 1986. The autumn air carried a crisp chill as 16-year-old Asad Amin walked home from school, his backpack slung over one shoulder, heavy with textbooks and even heavier with expectations. Being the adopted son of Muhammad Ali wasn't easy. It was like living in the shadow of a mountain that touched the clouds. The modest family home came into view as Asad turned the corner. Despite his father's fame and former fortune, they lived comfortably, but not extravagantly. The three-bedroom house on Fountain Avenue wasn't a mansion, but it was filled with photographs, memorabilia, and the echoes of a legend's life. Asad found his father sitting in his favorite armchair by the window. At 44, Muhammad Ali was already showing signs of Parkinson's disease. His once lightning-fast hands now trembled slightly, and his booming voice had softened to a measured murmur. But his eyes, those eyes still held the fire that had stared down Sonny Liston, George Foreman, and Joe Frazier. "How was school?" Ali asked, his words deliberate, measured. "Fine," Asad replied, dropping his backpack by the door. He hesitated, feeling the weight of the conversation he'd been rehearsing all day. "Dad, I need to talk to you about something." Ali nodded, gesturing to the chair opposite him. Asad sat down, his heart pounding like a speed bag. "I want to box," he said finally, the words hanging in the air between them. "I want to follow in your footsteps." For several long moments, Ali said nothing. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked loudly, marking the seconds of silence. Outside, the wind rustled through the Kentucky maple trees, their leaves turning the same gold as the medals his father had won. "Come with me," Ali said finally, rising slowly from his chair. Asad followed his father to the basement, a space that had been converted into a small home gym years ago. A punching bag hung in one corner, speed bags in another. An old ring timer sat on a shelf, unused for years. Ali picked up a pair of worn leather gloves and handed them to his son. "Put these on," he said. Asad's hands trembled with excitement as he laced up the gloves. They smelled of leather and history and greatness. "Hit the bag," Ali instructed, his voice quiet but clear. The boy approached the heavy bag, feeling his father's eyes on him. He took a stance that he'd practiced secretly in his bedroom mirror 100 times, trying to mimic the old videos he'd watched of his father in his prime. Then he threw a jab, awkward, unpracticed, but fueled by 16 years of dreams. If this story has made you feel something already, no matter how small, don't leave without giving back. Comment and tell me where you're watching this video from, and subscribe to the channel. Ali watched in silence as his son worked the bag for several minutes. Asad's form was raw, unrefined, but there was determination in every punch. "Enough," Ali said finally. Asad stopped, breathing hard, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead, despite the cool basement air. "Why do you want to box?" Ali asked. "Because I want to be like you," Asad answered immediately. "I want to be a champion. I want people to know my name." Ali's expression remained unchanged, but something shifted in his eyes, a sadness, perhaps, or a recognition. "Boxing isn't about being known," he said softly. "It's about knowing yourself." The next morning arrived with a hazy sunrise that painted the Louisville sky in shades of pink and gold. Asad barely slept, his mind replaying his father's words over and over. Boxing isn't about being known. It's about knowing yourself. What did that even mean? Over breakfast, Asad tried again. "Dad, I've been thinking about it all night. I really want to try boxing. Coach Wilson at school says I've got good reflexes." Ali finished chewing his toast deliberately before responding, "Come to the gym with me today." Asad nearly choked on his orange juice. His father rarely invited him to his training sessions anymore. "Really? Today?" Ali nodded. And 2 hours later, they pulled into the parking lot of the Columbia Gym, the same gym where a 12-year-old Cassius Clay had first laced up gloves after his bike was stolen in 1954. The brick building hadn't changed much in over 30 years, still standing as a testament to the beginnings of greatness. Inside, the familiar sense of sweat, liniment, and determination filled Assad's nostrils. Several boxers were already training, some on bags, others skipping rope, two sparring in the ring. They all stopped when Muhammad Ali entered. Even in his diminished physical state, his presence commanded respect. Ali nodded to his old trainer Angelo Dundee, who was working with a promising lightweight in the corner. "Muhammad," Angelo called out, his face breaking into a wide smile, "and young Assad. What brings you two in today?" "My son wants to be a boxer," Ali replied, his voice barely audible above the gym's ambient noise. Angelo's eyebrows rose as he looked at Assad. "Is that right? Well, come on over here. Let me see what you've got." For the next hour, Angelo put Assad through basic drills, jabs, footwork, defensive postures. The teenager was clumsy but eager, soaking up every instruction, every correction. Ali watched from a folding chair in the corner, his expression unreadable. After the workout, Assad's arms felt like lead, and his shirt was soaked through with sweat, but he felt alive, electrified. "He's got heart," Angelo told Ali as Assad cooled down. "Raw as they come, but there's something there." Ali nodded slowly. "He wants to be known," he said. Angelo glanced at Ali, understanding passing between the two men who had shared so much history. On the drive home, Assad couldn't contain his excitement. "Did you see when I landed that combination? Angelo said my left has potential just like yours." Ali drove in silence, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Dad, what did you think?" Assad finally asked, his enthusiasm dimming slightly at his father's lack of response. Ali pulled the car over to the side of the road and turned to face his son. "Do you know what I see when I look at you in that ring?" Assad waited, hope and anxiety mixing in his chest. "I see a boy trying to be someone else," Ali said, each word deliberate and heavy with meaning. "Boxing isn't a game. It's not fame. It's sacrifice." The following week passed in a blur of school, homework, and daily visits to the Columbia Gym. Angelo had taken an interest in Assad, working with him for an hour each afternoon. The teenager's technique was improving rapidly, his natural athleticism beginning to translate into boxing skill. At home, however, Ali remained reserved about his son's new passion. He would listen to Assad's excited recounting of training sessions, but offered little encouragement or advice. Friday afternoon, Angelo approached Assad as he unwrapped his hands after training. "There's a small amateur exhibition tomorrow. Nothing big, just local kids. Want to participate?" "Just 3 one-minute rounds." Assad's heart leaped. "Yes, absolutely." "Clear it with your father first," Angelo cautioned. That evening, Assad could barely contain himself as he told his father about the opportunity. "It's just a small exhibition, Dad. Will you come watch?" Ali studied his son's face for a long moment. "Do you remember Ernie Shavers?" The question caught Assad off guard. "The boxer you fought in '77? At Madison Square Garden?" Ali nodded slowly. "Hardest puncher I ever faced. Every hit felt like a sledgehammer. After that fight, I couldn't speak properly for days, couldn't remember my own phone number." Assad shifted uncomfortably. He'd heard stories of his father's battles, but Ali rarely spoke of the toll they had taken. "I'll come watch," Ali said finally. Saturday arrived with perfect clarity, a crisp October day with endless blue skies. The exhibition was being held in a community center gymnasium on the west side of Louisville. 8 amateur bouts were scheduled, with Assad's listed 5th on the program. As Assad warmed up in the makeshift locker room, his opponent walked in. a stocky boy named Marcus who had been boxing since he was 9. Marcus nodded respectfully when he recognized Muhammad Ali sitting quietly in the corner, watching his son prepare. "Your dad's the greatest," Marcus said to Assad. "It must be cool, having him in your corner." Assad nodded. Though Ali hadn't offered to be in his corner, Angelo would be there instead. When it was time, Assad entered the ring wearing borrowed headgear and gloves. He spotted his father sitting in the front row, expressionless. The bell rang, and Marcus came forward with practiced efficiency. The first punch caught Assad by surprise, a stiff jab that snapped his head back and sent a shockwave through his system. This wasn't like hitting the bags. This was another human being trying to hurt him. Assad recovered and began to move, trying to remember everything Angelo had taught him. He landed a few jabs of his own, felt a surge of confidence, and then walked straight into a right hook that sent him stumbling into the ropes. The crowd noise faded to a distant hum. Assad's vision blurred momentarily. He saw his father at ringside, still expressionless, and somehow that hurt more than Marcus's punch. The round ended, and Angelo gave him water and instructions. "Keep your right hand up. Move to your left, away from his power." Rounds 2 and 3 followed a similar pattern. Assad had moments of competence, but was clearly outmatched. When the final bell rang, there was no question who had won. Marcus's hand was raised, and Assad tasted blood from a small cut on his lip. In the locker room, Assad sat on a bench, holding an ice pack to his swelling cheekbone. Ali entered alone and sat beside him. "You did well," Ali said, surprising his son. "I lost," Assad replied, unable to keep the disappointment from his voice. "Everyone loses," Ali said. "I lost. What matters is why you're in the ring in the first place." Assad looked at his father, waiting for more. "Tomorrow," Ali said, "I want to show you something." Sunday morning dawned grey and drizzly, matching Assad's mood. His face was sore, his pride even more so. He found his father already dressed, waiting for him. "Where are we going?" Assad asked as they got into the car. "To see an old friend," Ali replied. They drove for nearly an hour, leaving Louisville behind and heading into rural Kentucky. Finally, they turned onto a narrow road that led to a small, well-kept farmhouse. A man about Ali's age was waiting on the porch. "Jimmy!" Ali called out as they approached, his voice stronger than Assad had heard in months. The two men embraced like brothers. "Muhammad Ali in the flesh," Jimmy said, grinning. "And this must be Assad." Jimmy led them inside, where photographs covered one wall of the living room. Assad recognized his father in many of them, younger, in his prime. In several, Jimmy stood beside him, both in boxing gear. "Jimmy Ellis," Ali explained to his son. "Former heavyweight champion of the world. We trained together as boys." Assad's eyes widened. He'd heard the name but had never met the man. "Your dad tells me you want to be a boxer," Jimmy said, studying Assad's bruised face. "Had your first bout yesterday, I see." "It didn't go well," Assad admitted. Jimmy chuckled. "Neither did my first, or your father's, for that matter." They spent the morning with Jimmy, who shared stories of the old days, training in Miami, fighting in smoke-filled arenas, the brotherhood of boxers. By noon, they were seated at Jimmy's kitchen table, eating sandwiches. "Show him," Ali said suddenly to Jimmy. Jimmy nodded, understanding immediately. He stood and lifted his shirt, revealing a torso mapped with surgical scars. "Detached retina," he explained. "Kidney damage. 3 operations on my back." He rolled up his sleeve to show a right arm that wouldn't fully straighten. "This from the Cooper fight in '68. Jimmy sat back down and looked Assad in the eye. "Every punch costs something, son. You pay at the time, and you keep paying for years after." Ali reached into his pocket and removed a small pill container. He opened it, revealing several medications. 4 times a day, he said quietly, to keep the shaking down, to help me speak, to ease the pain. Assad looked between the two former champions, understanding dawning on him. But it was worth it, right? He asked. The glory, the fame, the championships. Ali and Jimmy exchanged a look. What you see, Ali said, his voice now barely above a whisper, is not what it costs. The car ride home was silent. Assad stared out the window at the Kentucky landscape, his mind churning. As they approached Louisville, Ali finally spoke again. I named you Assad, he said. It means happiest in Arabic. I didn't name you after me. I didn't want you to carry that burden. That evening, Assad sat in his room, the borrowed boxing gloves from the gym on his desk. He picked them up, felt their weight, remembered the shock of Marcus's punches, the taste of blood in his mouth. He thought of his father, the greatest of all time, now struggling to button his own shirt in the morning. He thought of Jimmy Ellis and his scarred body, the arm that wouldn't straighten. A knock at his door. Ali entered, moving slowly. Have you decided? He asked. Assad looked at the gloves in his hands, then at his father. I think I have. And I want to know myself, Assad said. But I don't think boxing is the way I'll do it. Ali's face remained impassive, but his eyes softened. He sat beside his son on the bed and placed a trembling hand on his shoulder. The greatest victory, Ali said, his voice stronger now, filled with conviction, is the one that saves you from yourself. The next day, Assad returned the gloves to Angelo at the Columbia gym. The old trainer nodded in understanding. Your father was the greatest in the ring, Angelo said. But his greatest wisdom was knowing when to guide someone away from it. Years later, Assad would understand that his father's one phrase, "What you see is not what it costs," was not just about boxing. It was about choices, about seeing beyond glory to truth, about finding your own path rather than walking in another's footsteps, even if those footsteps belong to the greatest of all time. If you've made it this far and felt every word, don't leave without subscribing, all right? I tell these stories with my heart on my sleeve to reach people like you, who feel, who get emotional, who truly live. If this really touched you, give back. Comment, subscribe. Come be part of this family with me until the next video.